Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Jacques, and I'm going to do a brief overview of Chapter 2 here for our micro lecture this week. And starting out, we're just getting a nice definition of the science of sport and exercise psychology, and you'll see here that it's systematic, it's controlled, it's empirical, and critical. Theory is the end goal. Theory comes from obviously starting with observing, but then describing, explaining, predicting, controlling some of the scientific guidelines: systematic, controlled, empirical, critical. And so theory are a set of interrelated facts, and they're presenting a systematic view of some phenomenon in order to describe, explain, and predict its future occurrences. So this is classic, and of course Kurt Lewin, the father of social psychology, one of my favorite theorists, and someone that I've actually worked with people he trained, which is kind of great coincidence. So studies and experiment. A study, the investigators observing and assessing and sort of staying out of the mix, and the experiment, of course, involves manipulating variables. So an example of a study here, and then an example of an experiment. Give you a chance to just look those over. So again, the determining of cause and effect relationships can be more isolated with experiments. And then we get into the use of what's called professional practice knowledge. And this is the stuff that we learn by being embedded, by being in the mix. This might include things like grounded theory, or different kinds of portraiture. So this involves often a mix of methods, and it also includes things like introspection and intuition, taking time to reflect, go deep, including things like sorting, bringing in focus groups. So just trying to delineate between scientifically derived and professional practice. And professional practice, you might just call that more embedded research. So one of the things about the scientific is it can be more systematic and controlled. They're going to say objective and unbiased, but I'm actually going to disagree with that. I think all research has bias. We're looking for things, and I think it's one of the fallacies of the scientific method is that people think it's unbiased. But when you look at it more closely, and a lot of researchers have really advocated for this, is that we do have bias, and we have ways that we affect the research we're doing just from our background and maybe our intentions or expectations. Professional practice, again, more that embedded. This is holistic, innovative, immediate, less reliable, more generalizable, say. Interesting that they say greater susceptibility to bias. And I will say, an example of this might be a psychologist who does a lot of work with a particular population, and then they write case studies. And hopefully they look to expose their bias, and they name it and own it. And I think, yeah, there is bias in all research, and the important part is owning it. So a couple things here. Realistic expectations, I think, and knowing that things aren't going to be perfect. The art of coaching, teaching, and leadership, when to individualize. So I want to talk about 3 perspectives or approaches and break them down into their components just to try and give you a easier way to access what these mean. So the 3 of them: the psychophysiological orientation, the social, psychological, and the cognitive behavioral. So the psychophysiological, of course, starts with the mind, and then it goes to the physiology or the body. So this is examining underlying psychophysiological processes of the brain. So how does the brain affect the body, like things like biofeedback? The next category, the social psychological, how does the environment we're in, the context, the social side impact someone? And then lastly, the cognitive behavioral. This is now essentially acknowledging both the environment and the thinking and saying that there's going to be a mix. And we'll see more of this combining of methods as we move into some more perspectives in future chapters. But just some trends to round out the PowerPoint here. Definitely this field is expanding and booming. There's some huge advances, especially in the field of neuro leadership. We're seeing more coaching that includes counseling and more sports psychologists in the mix. Ethics are really important, and I'll just do a quick flyover at the end of some key ethics. Subspecialties are developing. The folks that just study versus the folks that apply, they say there's tension. I'm personally a pragmatist, and I love drawing from both, and I feel like it's actually not necessarily a source of tension, but a great chance to collaborate. Qualitative methods are emerging more and getting more validity. There's more work opportunities, increased acceptance. Positive psychology is a huge part of this, and we're going to look at that because I'm a huge proponent of it. Strengths-based approaches, we'll be doing strengths-based leadership assessment, for example. Globalization, certainly multidisciplinary, and technology are some of the big trends. Also the cultural part, inclusion, diversity, and lastly, more professionalized, more standards and certifications. There is a link to business. It's actually one of the things I do is team building, and I do a lot of organization development. I work as a consultant with a bunch of regional businesses, and I love using the sports theories and philosophy and the team best practices to help businesses work better together. And then lastly, just some piece around ethics, the competence, integrity, scientific responsibility, respecting people's rights and dignity, concern for welfare, social responsibility. And that is it for the PowerPoint. I just wanted to do a quick flyby. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in class.